All right, my friends, welcome back to another edition of the Reisinger build. We are building this house start to finish for you guys to show you the entire process. And as you can see, the house is looking amazing. On this episode, we're gonna jump into all the details on the sheathing on the outside of the house. This is a really important part of the house because it gives structure, right? When the wind blows like it's blowing now, we want that house to stay upright and not do this. Plus, the sheathing on this house is also doing double duty for us. It's our water barrier and our air barrier, which is really the secret beauty of the Uhler ZIP System sheathing. So with that being said, guys, the sheathing episode, let's get going.
A Build original series in partnership with Builder's First Source, the Reisinger Build. This episode is sponsored by Huber Engineered Woods.
Okay, y'all, come take a tour with me. We finished framing. Basically, you can see actually I have this kind of front dormer where the upstairs living room is coming out. That's finishing up now, but this is a really important stage for us to jump in on the sheathing. The sheathing on the outside of the house is a product called ZIP R. This is a product that's both sheathing and exterior insulation, so a very interesting two-in-one product. We're gonna get into in a minute. And that's the green product you're seeing here, but on the rooftop, the brown product is ZIP System sheathing, but it's slightly thicker. It's basically a nominal 5/8. My engineer wanted that slightly stronger material on the roof to make sure that that roof was nice and strong, that I didn't have any sagging, any of that kind of stuff going on. The crew's done a great job. We passed our inspection, so we got a lot to talk about, and we just started the taping phase today. But before we go too far, I actually need to rewind time a little bit because it's really important to show you what we did during the course of framing in terms of sequencing. So let's rewind time and let's show you the connection between the house and the garage. All right, so this is start of sheathing at this stage of construction. And you're gonna notice that we don't have any trusses on the house right now. And let's walk around the side of the house because I wanna point out a really important detail. This is often missed and is so critical that we've got to film it right now at this stage of construction. As I mentioned, this is day 5 of framing, so we're going real quick. But this detail right here in the corner really tells the story that I want to show right here, which is the sheathing on the garage wall that's separating the house from the garage is complete all the way up, and we're taking it past the framing. So in other words, see that 2x right there, that top plate? We cut that top plate so the sheathing can actually go all the way through that. We need all the sheathing on and this fully taped before we complete the garage framing and before the roof rafters, the roof trusses for the garage are put in place. So now this sheathing right here, which is on this side, can come across and touch this and tape this joint, and then we're good to go on framing to continue. It's actually kind of a good spot to show you this too. This is ZIP R6. This product is 1 inch of foam, that's where the R6 comes from, bonded to standard ZIP sheathing. This is a huge time saver because now one trip around the house and I've installed the WRB and I've installed my continuous exterior thermal break with that foam on the outside. And this is a really good spot to show that. Look, this area doesn't have a lot of studs, so I'm gonna be able to put some great cavity insulation there. But check out these 2 PSLs that are bearing the weight right there. This is a big thermal bridge. I've got a full stud here. I've got 2 PSLs. Without that R6 on the outside, this would only have the insulation value of the studs. And you know, wood does have an insulation value. It's about R1 per inch. So, you know, that 2x6 in this PSL, it's around R6, but then I put another 1 inch of foam on the outside, and now all of a sudden I've got a full R12 in totality when it comes to insulation. So let's come back as the guys are working around this. I'm going to show you some more of the details. All right, another detail I wanted to mention that's a little bit out of the ordinary, that's really more of an engineering detail than a sheathing detail, but it makes sense here, is I want to talk about why I've got brown zip on the face of the garage. Now, if you were to look at the street towards this garage, the garage opening has 2 big garage doors, right? And so if the wind were to push against the side of the house, so there's 2 big garage openings, we've taken out a lot of the shear wall by not having, let's say, ZIP System across there, right? And so as a result, the engineer has made something called a portal frame. And a portal frame is basically a way to strengthen this wall, even though there's less sheathing. I've got some Simpson straps that were embedded into the foundation. There's 2 here, 2 in the middle column, and 2 on the far column. Those straps come up and are nailed directly to the studs that are behind them. And then my engineer told me that he wanted to use the slightly thicker zip, the 5/8 zip, across this face. Now I ended up doubling up the zip here only because I was trying to flush out where I've got the ZIP R, because this is 5/8 and the ZIP R is 1.5 inches, so it was closer to flush. So we used 2 layers, we didn't have to do that. Okay, so now as we're looking back on the garage, check out that garage header. You know, normally you'd think of a header over a window or a door as stopping and a stud coming by on either side of that header, but in fact, this header runs all the way across. That's part of this shear wall detail that my engineer calls portal framing. So continuous header all the way across, continuous sheathing as much as possible across that opening, and then those sets of straps tied all together. So basically we've got our feet planted, and now if the wind pushes against me, I'm firmly planted and that door is not going anywhere. That framing now has turned into a shear wall. And what I like about it is we've used basically normal and off the shelf and frankly not very expensive materials. You know, we could have engineered this with a steel beam, a steel beam with a bunch of steel columns that were bolted down. It's harder to get. I got to get another sub. It can typically be more expensive. I could have used a Simpson shear wall. That's a pre-made wall that would bolt down into that corner. Again, it's a bit of a special order item. They can be a little bit more expensive. But what I like here is that Whit, my engineer, designed this to be both budget friendly and kind of off the shelf friendly. And we've got a really strong house. In the end, I want that really, really heavy duty house, that house that feels like it's built really well. So even though we're building this house on a budget, we're making sure we do it to a really high standard when it comes to strength and a high standard when it comes to high performance and comfort and insulation value. And that's really how this sheathing is coming together for me. I'm really liking how it's looking. Okay guys, so I thought it was really vital to see those garage connection details, but we're back to real time again. And before we jump into it, let me show you a couple things real fast. This is the ZIP R-sheathing we're using on the house. So this is ZIP System sheathing, which you're seeing right here. This is basically an OSB product that has a green facer applied to it already, which is a water and air barrier on top of this, such that when we apply this, this is gonna act like structural sheathing on the house, but it's also gonna be our water and air barrier. And then when we tape the seams on that, that's gonna complete the system to make sure that we're water and airtight on the house. And the big thing that I like about this that really makes me a believer is that instead of, let's say, a mechanically applied, stapled on house wrap, which does a good job of waterproofing, and I did that on a lot of houses, this does waterproofing plus air sealing, which is a really, really big deal. By using that tape on the seams, we're getting a really good air barrier in the house. As my buddy Steve Basic would say, that green facing is the Alamo. We don't want any water or air to get past that green facing. And the beauty of that green facing is that it's the perfect substrate, meaning it's 100% engineered to take this tape. And oh, by the way, it's also engineered to take beautifully this product called Liquid Flash, which is a fluid applied flashing. This is also a Huber product, and both of these stick perfectly, tenaciously to the sheathing. Let's go check out the details as we come up here now. So one thing that we did that's a little different on this house is we did a double bottom plate detail. You can see it right here at the front door. We've got a 2x6 bottom plate and then a 2x4 bottom plate on top of that, because the walls are actually structurally 2x4 walls. And the reason why we did the 2x6 bottom plate is when the guys put the ZIP System sheathing on, that 2x6 bottom plate is capturing the bottom of the foam. Now that's not a requirement. If you go to the ZIP System install instructions, there's lots of ways to do it without doing that. But for me, that's really a best practice. And this is a detail that Steve Basic came up with that I really like. I like covering the bottom of that foam. And especially down here in the South, where I've got ants all over the place and termites are a real issue, I like having that covered. And then you'll notice that the framers now are taking that joint where the 2x4 and the sheathing comes together, and they're putting a 4-inch piece of zip tape on top of that joint. So really that's my water and my air sealing. Now, one thing I want to tell you about that I want to rewind time on a little bit. When this product first came to market, I didn't believe in it. I was scared, frankly, of using a tape. I'd seen lots of tapes fail over the years. I mean, how many of you have put duct tape on something only to find 6 weeks later that the duct tape has peeled off, especially outside, right? In this case, though, the testing and engineering is unbelievable. And as I said earlier, this green facer is totally engineered to take that tape. This is also not normal tape. This is an acrylic adhesive that when you roll it, by the way, you need to roll the tape. You'll see the guys using a roller on there. The rolling is important because that's part of the process. It actually wets the tape, the acrylic adhesive, and it kind of melts, so to speak, a little bit into that green facer. This is not a chemist talking, this is a builder talking. So that it actually bonds and it grows in strength over time. So if you peeled it off right away, you'd be surprised it would actually be able to peel off. But over 24 hours, 48 hours, that bond gets stronger. And if you come back a week later and try to peel it, you'll see it is crazy stuck on there. But it does need to be rolled. And the roller the guys are using is actually a roller from Huber that has a little typewriter Z on it, which is kind of cool. So when he's rolling that, if I go back later and look at this tape on the corner here, it's gonna be a little hard to tell on the camera. It's really easy for me to see with my eyes. You can actually see the Z on there. Let's see if my flashlight highlights it a little better. See those Z's right there? It's like a perfect Z on the tape, which now I know as a builder, oh great, my guys rolled the tape. That's important. We really want to roll that tape. Let's talk about nails penetrating for a minute though. See these nails right here? These nails are penetrating that sheathing, and some are a little deeper than others. In fact, these are a little deeper than some of the other portions of the house. Let's go over here where they're a little bit more perfectly flush. So like, see this one that's almost perfectly flush right there? That's technically where we want that nail to be, is right there. But you know, my buddy Jake Bruton has done some testing in the past. It's an old Build Show Network video where he took a nail that was overdriven, one that was too far in, kind of like this guy here, which is just a little bit overdriven, but say that was another 1/8 inch or so deeper. He took a nail like that and he put a blower door on the back side and basically sucked out like a vacuum air through there to try and get air to leak through there. And then he took a hose for an hour and hosed that nail, and he wasn't able to get any water through that whatsoever. So that tells me that as long as you don't nail too deep, you're totally fine. So in other words, these nails here, we're not doing anything for these. We're gonna totally leave these alone. There's nothing that needs to get done for those. For my own sake though, what I've found over the years is typically when I remodel a house that's 20, 30, 40 years old, almost all the problems with rot I found in the bottom foot. So what I might do on this house is come back to the bottom foot, 2 foot, and I might either put a little piece of tape over these nails, or I might put a little dab of liquid flash. Remember we talked about that earlier? Just for a little extra protection. Not necessary, not called for on the Huber details. I kind of call that ZIP 1.5, where we're doing just a little bit of extra detailing at the base of the house, just to really make sure that everything's good. The other thing I want to mention though, let's actually walk around the corner where they haven't zipped before, is let's talk nailing pattern. You know, this ZIP R-sheathing needs a different nailing pattern than just standard zip, or let's say if I put standard OSB or plywood on, and you got to check the tech details depending on the thickness. I forgot to mention this ZIP R-sheathing comes in an R3, an R6, an R9, and an R12. Now the nice thing about this R6 that you can see, actually you can see the foam right here where it's been cut out of the window. See how that foam is breaking that thermal bridge between the sheathing and the wood here? That's also bridging over, let's say, that big header that I've got right there. I've got that big LVL header, and that R6 foam is in front of that header. So it's breaking that tendency for wood to move that heat into the house. Now wood does have a thermal insulation value. It's about R1 per inch, let's say. But by putting that continuous blanket of R6 on here, that's gonna make a huge difference on the heating and cooling bills, and ultimately the comfort of this house, which is what I care more about. Nail pattern, back to that though. The ZIP instructions on this, if you look it up, are gonna call for a specific nail type and a nail type pattern. And in the field, this sheathing, this R6, requires 1 foot spacing between the nails in the field and no more than 4 inches on the edge. Now, full disclosure here, see these 2 nails at 6 inches? We actually nailed the house at 6 inch in the field. And we realized after we started, oh shoot, we're actually supposed to be at 4 inch. So we came back and did an extra nail in between there. So in fact, I'm more like a 3 inch nail pattern instead of a 4 inch, which is fine, but I actually messed up. We looked at it at the very beginning. Somehow I didn't translate to the crew properly. They did 6 inch in the field. It was no big deal. So we're slightly over nailed, but you'll also notice that we've got this up and we didn't tape it while we go. Where I am in the city of Austin, we require an engineer or a third party to come inspect the nail pattern on your sheathing before you put your house wrap up, or in this case, before I put my tape up. So I wasn't able to sheath it and tape it as I went. I needed to leave everything untaped and come back after my inspection. My engineer Whit was out yesterday, verified everything, said it looks great. So now we're coming back and we're actually taping everything as we speak. Let's let the crew keep rolling on this install and we'll come back and point out some more details. Check it out, celebrity framer. I was gonna call you celebrity builder, celebrity framer. Tim Uhler, awesome framers. Perfect timing to be on the job, Tim. We're talking sheathing on this episode. We're about half sheathed right now. I'm curious from your perspective what you think about the way we sheathe compared to how you are typically sheathing your houses.
Pretty similar.
Okay.
We're trying to sheath as much as we can before we lift the wall.
Yep.
We're just eliminating ladder work, but I understand with the big crew, you got to keep everybody busy.
Yeah.
What I really like, a couple things I noticed, you're sheathed right to the top of the blocks.
Yep.
So the roof diaphragm transfers to the wall diaphragm.
Yep.
Right down to your concrete.
Yeah, so that's that monopoly framing that he's talking about, meaning our trusses are clipped at the wall, there's no rafters, so now structurally we're tied all the way in.
Yeah. And that eliminates the need for some hardware.
Yeah,
at least for us. I really like looking over there that you have a block line. You know, you've started from the mud sill.
Yep.
Go up whatever the panel length is.
Yep.
Block it, go up whatever the panel length is, and now you've bridged the rim by, it looks like about a foot.
Yeah.
On the lower floor,
so
and like 6 feet on the upper floor.
There's some really good strength there.
Yeah. But like, why not take advantage of that? It's not any extra labor.
That's right.
Of course, they're gonna block this.
Yeah, they're gonna have to block this here so that when we put this bottom panel on, this is blocked. And Tim, I don't know if you realize, but we did something a little different on this house for show house reasons. This is the Build Show Live house. So this wall is standard ZIP System sheathing, and I'm gonna do 3 inches of Atlas exterior insulation on this wall. I'm kind of making this my northern wall.
Okay.
You know, if you're in a real cold climate, this is a really good way to get a lot of exterior insulation to warm up your cavity. The rest of the house though, like those panels you're seeing beyond us, are ZIP R6. And so actually in this transition here, the guys did a real nice job. You may have been wondering, why is this overhanging? The ZIP R6, this is a Steve Basic detail, pockets down into this 2x6 bottom plate, and then most of the house is framed with 2x4 walls. This wall here is a 2x6 wall that has standard zip on it. So that ZIP R is going to transition in, and this is running long to catch the edge of that
Then you just
foam.
tape the corner.
Yeah.
You know what I really like you did here? Because we've had a double sill detail before. In the old days, we just bolted down the mud sill, started building, and then we had to notch all of our plates. And I asked the engineer, I was like, can I just use a longer anchor bolt?
Yep.
He's like, oh, it's stronger. Bolt them both together. So you guys being able to come through here, inspector can see that. Both plates are bolted.
Yes.
So this entire shear load is going to transfer right to your concrete.
That's right.
Yeah, nice job.
And now both those bottom plates will tie in with the nailing pattern on the ZIP system as well, and it's going to be that much stronger.
You know, the other thing is I noticed they're being very detail oriented, the framers are, on the nailing.
Yeah, for sure.
Not just because the weather resistant barriers here, we don't want to overdrive.
Yep.
That's what's going to keep our occupants safe.
Yep.
So when we as framers, we have to install this stuff correctly. Don't overdrive.
Yeah.
And I saw them over here with the tape measure. I mean, they're like the nail spacing and the depth is right on the money.
Yeah, that's right. Good stuff. Tim, thank you so much for joining me on the job site.
Yeah, thanks for having
Let's let these guys continue, and we'll continue on this episode. Okay, here's a detail that's not necessary per the Huber instructions, but I like to do. And what he's doing is he's cutting out 1 inch of the foam for a corner piece. If you look at this, he's cutting 1 inch off the foam so that when we get to a corner, I've got a solid joint and the foam is not showing. So we've taped this now so you can't see it as well. But if we were to pull this tape, you would see that I've got green zip facer to green zip facer. And it's because he cut out the corner on one of these edges so the next piece would come in. Again, the zip instructions, the Huber instructions do not call for that. You do not have to do that. But I like having that solid corner in there. It just means that when I'm nailing and putting siding up, everything is gonna be really solid and really nice. So that's a detail that I like, but again, it doesn't need to be done per Huber. Now here's something that's a little tricky on this house, and I want to point it out. We're in a porch area here. This is a porch soffit. And so directly above my head here, there's no living space above this area. This is all open, and I'll ventilate this before I put my porch soffit on. I think we've got ventilated hardy soffit going in here. So this will get this will be a ventilated cavity, and there's no living space above. So one thing I did right here, but I did mess up one small detail. See how the ZIP sheathing R went on first before these roof trusses went on? That allowed me to ledger this on, meaning I used a 6-inch a 5-inch Simpson structural screw into that space. It's got a big fat washer style head, and that's ledgered all the way back to the framing beyond. However, I did make one mistake. I should have taped this joint first before this ledger went on. In the garage, we taped it first before the trusses went on, but we missed that detail here. Not the end of the world. There's gonna be a small amount of air leakage there, but I really should have taped that first before we got in there. But you're noticing that basically on every bay, we ledgered that on. And now this porch, which is outside of the envelope, will be air sealed to the house via the ZIP System sheathing. Now, as we scroll over here, you can see I've got this overhang, which makes things a little bit more difficult from an air sealing perspective. Also a little harder, frankly, from an insulation perspective, but that's a whole nother episode. This subfloor right here that's sticking out is my 1/1 Advantech X Factor. That's sticking out and is connecting to the rest of the house. And then this right here is my framing for the bump out on the second floor. It's basically like a little family room bump out, a nice architectural detail. But that bump out extends into the house right here, which is into the envelope. And then as I go this way here on the porch, we're out of the envelope. So I'm gonna need to use a little bit of spray foam, closed cell spray foam, to insulate this. I could get a froth pack, or later when the Owens Corning guys come, we could use their Owens Corning product to insulate this. But when I add this sheathing right here on the top, this is gonna be ZIP R sheathing right here where my tape measure is. I'm gonna wanna try and do a little bit of an air seal back there. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run a bead of Lexel along here, along this bottom plate and along this subfloor, so that when I stick that ZIP System R up against that, it's gonna squeeze out some of that sealant and give me some extra air sealing, because it's gonna be really hard to tape that area later. We're also gonna put that ZIP R on the wall first before we continue this roof decking. So this roof decking that's up here, you can see you guys did a real nice job of holding that back several inches. This ZIP R is gonna come first. We'll get it taped, and then we'll add this roof decking to finish that off and tape it. A little bit of a tricky detail, but while we're thinking about that, let's walk back to another section of the house. I have two other kind of overhang areas on the house. Sorry for the noise, we got a router bit going over here. So if I walk out this Pella man door right here, you guys stay there, let me hop down. You can see I've got this soffit area which extends through my envelope and into this area. Now I could have potentially taken this ZIP System sheathing up and monopoly frame this and basically cut off these rafters, pardon me, these trusses, and added a new set of trusses. But the easy method that I'm gonna use here is I'm gonna take this ZIP R sheathing, and we're basically gonna take the lid right here and put a lid of ZIP R all the way across here. We'll tape it up on all sides, and now my attic will be part of the conditioned envelope on this house. Now we're gonna be using closed cell spray foam in this attic later in the insulation process. But again, the beauty of the ZIP is that once I tape it, it's airtight. And this is forming the difference between the outside and the inside. I want to keep the outside out and keep the inside in. And so that's why we're doing that. Stay tuned for future episodes. We're going to be talking about fresh air and how we bring in fresh air. But the point is, I want to build the tightest house I can, especially from an air and a water perspective. And then later, I'm going to add some mechanical ventilation. It's really, really important to build as tight a house as we can, because when air leaks in, it can bring moisture with it. And that moisture can cause problems for our houses in all kinds of reasons and all kinds of ways. So we're trying to get that nice tight envelope, and that's why I really like this ZIP System sheathing. Let's go check a couple of the other taping details on the side. Okay, one detail that's a little different on this house, we use ZIP R everywhere except for this one wall of the house. This wall we sheathe with standard ZIP System sheathing. You can tell here right at this window opening, this is just standard ZIP. And this happens to be a 2x6 framed wall in this area. What's happening here is I'm doing a slightly different detail where I'm going to do a thicker exterior insulation. I'm calling this kind of my northern house. We're going to be doing 3 inches of exterior Atlas polyiso, which is just shy of an R20. I think it's like R19 point something. And we're going to be applying that on the face of the ZIP, on the outside of the ZIP. You know, if you're in a really cold climate, the purpose of exterior insulation, of course, is energy efficiency, but another big reason is that in a really cold climate, where it's really cold outside and your house is warm and your house might have some humidity in it, we don't want any air that's coming through that cavity, if there was some air leakage, to hit a cold condensing surface. So the exterior insulation warms up the sheathing, warms up the studs, so if there was any air leakage through there, that air would hit a very warm surface and wouldn't have the condensation problems. So if you're in a northern climate, I really like doing a thick blanket of insulation on top of the ZIP R. It's totally up to you. You got to figure that out for your own climate. But if you're looking for that thick insulation, higher than ZIP R12, for instance, in those really cold climates, this is the way to go. Standard ZIP, and then put that insulation outboard of that. On this particular wall, you can see that my ZIP is just barely over the foundation. There's really no taping necessary here, but I have a detail I want to show you later on that. But everything else you can see is fully taped. And now that the tape's on, you can also tell where the panel breaks are. You can see the framers basically took, this is a 9-foot ceiling, by the way, went up 1 foot and then ran that ZIP System sheathing all the way up to the top where the wall meets the roof. Now, we haven't talked about this yet, but we framed this house and we're building it with what I call monopoly framing. That means we're framing it so that the wall can actually touch the roof, and now I can put a tape joint right in that location, and I've got a really bomber air barrier and water barrier from the foundation all the way to the ridge with no breaks. I don't have any rafters poking through that make it more difficult to air and water seal. Now, this house is a conditioned attic space. I'm going to be using closed cell spray foam up in the attic to make that part of the air conditioned envelope. That's a great detail in the south where you've got slab on grade construction. I don't have a basement to put my mechanicals, and the framers did this in a really awesome way, meaning this piece of 4x8 ZIP now is connecting the walls to the trusses, and they solid blocked where the breaks are, so they've got a solid block behind here to nail this piece in, and they put the 1 foot at the bottom. Now, something else to notice, on this wall right here on the side, they did the opposite. They went from the foundation up to 8 foot, but remember, this is a 9-foot ceiling, and then my trusses are 18-inch floor trusses. That next sheet then, from where that top of that zip tape is there, runs up 8 feet and is connecting my second floor to my trusses to my first floor. That's a fantastic best practice. I really like that. From a shear value, from an engineering perspective, that's absolutely best case scenario to connect all those 3 layers together in one with that zip system. And then the last piece of zip is running all the way up to the roof, just like we talked about that monopoly framing. All right, before we finish up this episode on sheathing, there's one critical detail that I want to mention. You know, we talked about earlier, this zip system does an amazing job of being a waterproofing and also an air sealing layer And once I get this taped, this is an amazing air control layer. That's why I did this Monopoly framing. But there's one additional step that I really think is important, and that's detailing between the house and the foundation. You know, this is a perfect spot to talk about it because I've got a bit of an elevated slab here. But what you're seeing here is that bottom plate. You remember we had that 2-plate detail, 2x4 framed wall, 2x6 bottom plate that got ripped to accommodate the bottom of my ZIP R. Now where this actually lands onto the foundation, it looks like my foundation was a little bit off here. Yes, we make mistakes here as well, and we're not always perfect. Here's what I'm doing. I'm gonna slice off this little bit of sill sealer that's sticking out here. And now you can see I've got foundation, I've got bottom plate, and then I've got sheathing. We're pretty well air sealed with this detail that we did in an earlier episode where we used some Lexel between the foundation and this sill sealer. But I'm a big fan of belt and suspenders. And if you think about this joint on the house, this can be a highway for bugs to get in the house, and especially in Texas where we've got termites, we've got ants, we've got all this stuff. We want some concrete showing. This is a good thing. We're a little bit more than we need. I'd say we really want a minimum of 8 inches of concrete showing in all our jobs. But what I want to do is I want to detail this joint right here and make this extra tight and really seal that. Now in some other places in the house, you notice that we ran zip tape, a 4-inch slice, over the bottom of the sheathing and taped it to the sill. But in this case where I've got this foundation really tight, basically flush with the house, I had the guys hold off on taping it because I'm going to do a slightly different detail. I'm going to use either this product right here, which is ZIP System Liquid Flash, and I'm going to basically detail this with ZIP System Liquid Flash, or I'm going to show you 2 other products that are an awesome option as well. First off, Prosico Fast Flash. This feels to me like a similar product to the ZIP System Liquid Flash. This is you'll see this guns out gray, this one guns out red. They're pretty similar to consistency, but there's another product that I actually like even better. It's called Prosico Joint and Seam Filler, which is a similar product to these two, but inside are fibers, like a fiberglass fiber. And so this now can fill joints. And I don't have to read and verify, but I'm pretty sure this will fill up to something like a 1/2 or 3/4 inch joint. Now, if we did have a big joint like that, we want to use backer rod. But the idea is with those fibers, it's able to kind of span some distances, kind of like a little bridge. And so here where I've got a little gap, that's not even a 1/4 inch, but let's say a 1/4 inch gap between the concrete and my bottom plate here, this is the perfect product to use right here and span all those gaps. So then in the future, when those bugs, when those creepy crawlies, whenever tries to crawl up from the foundation, it's gonna hit that and it's not gonna be able to get into the house. Now there's one other thing that I wanna tell you about though. This zip tape right here, which is a 4-inch tape that comes in a roll, when you see it coming off the roll, this is an amazing acrylic adhesive. And once that adhesive wets into that sheathing, it really sticks. This membrane, or this green facer is the perfect substrate for that. However, when that roll comes off, there's a release agent on the face of this. And if I were to use any one of these fluid applieds on top of this roll right here, it would look like it sticks, but in time it would come off because that release agent is here. So if we're gonna go over top of any tapes that have that release agent, we actually need to use a little bit of acetone to clean that off. Another option I could do right here is simply just cut this tape back a little bit, you know, take 1 inch off of it. So I've got some bare wood to stick to. You know, these fluid applieds, all 3 of these fluid applied products stick tenaciously to ZIP System sheathing, to wood, and to concrete. And so they're gonna be able to span that gap. So I could just pull that tape off right here and now I'm good to go. Or I could wipe this down with some acetone. Now, if you look at my windows though, I used a bunch of 6-inch tape. And on the 6-inch tape, there was a release liner on the back of that kind of brown release liner. That tape doesn't have the release agent on it because they're not worried about that tape unrolling and being able to not stick to itself. So if I've got that 6-inch tape that had a release liner, no acetone needed. If I've got the 4-inch tape that unrolls on itself, no liner, and I'm gonna try and stick some fluid applied to it, I wanna wipe that with acetone. just a quick wipe with acetone, and we're gonna get that release agent off. So that being said, I'm gonna show you how to detail this. It's pretty straightforward. I'm gonna use a little bit of tape just to make the job a little neater. You don't have to do that, but of course it always looks nicer for your customers. I'm gonna tape maybe 1 inch down on the concrete, and I'm gonna come up probably 1.5 to 2 inches on the ZIP system and run that tape down. And then, like I said, I'm gonna use that joint and seam from Prosico on this section. I could have gone with fast flash, I could have gone with liquid flash, but with a few joints here, that seems like a really good maneuver. And then on the rest of the house, where I've got more of an overhang like you're seeing here, now this actually has a deck ledger on it. I might do the same thing. I might cut off this sill sealer here, and I'm not really worried about this pressure treated lumber getting rot or other issues, but I do want some really good air and bug sealing down here. So what I'm probably gonna do is go around the house and detail this joint right here with a big fat bead of either liquid flash or one of those 2 Prosico products I showed you. And then this seam right here, we're gonna tape that with some regular 4-inch zip flashing tape. That's gonna cover over all those nail holes down there. That's gonna cover and air seal that joint between the zip and the bottom plate. And then once I do this, guys, this house is gonna be good to go for a long, long time. With that being said, huge thanks to Huber Engineered Woods for being a sponsor on the Reisinger build. They've been a great partner of mine for a long time. I really believe in their products and their engineering, and their products really allow me to get this monopoly framing that you see on this house and do it with a super good air seal and a super good water seal. So amazing products. Guys, follow the rest of the series, rewind if you need to, and for sure check out that next episode of the Reisinger build in partnership with our friends at Builders First Source. We'll see you next time on the Reisinger build.